Today we're going to talk about communism. Let's start off with a definition. Communism is the political system where the government controls everything and provides most everything for its citizens.
Swag.
There are no social classes and no one has supreme control. Everyone works for the government. The idea of communism was established by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in their book, The Communist Manifesto. It explains the existence of proletariat and bourgeoisie classes. The proletariats, or working class, are oppressed by the bourgeoisie, or business owners. When the oppression becomes too great, the proletariats will rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie. This idea didn't become popular until 1917, when the Russian Revolution turned Russia into a communist state. Later, Russia supported Mao Zedong, who led the Communist Revolution in China to establish the People's Republic of China, or PRC, also a communist state. After the Chinese Communist Revolution in 1949, China became the Communist People's Republic of China. 1 year later, the Korean War broke out. American forces gained a lot of ground. But when Chinese forces arrived in the war, American forces retreated. Near the same time, the PRC was helping the Viet Cong in the Vietnam War. In 1986, the PRC and the USSR had a falling out when differing ideas of executing communism arose. This divide in ideas eventually helped Richard Nixon in his pursuit in Sino-American relations. After World War II, communism seemed to spread rapidly, and Americans saw that as a threat. Harry Truman created Truman Doctrine to stop communism influence in mainly Europe and specifically Turkey and Greece. Later on, the Marshall Plan added to the Truman Doctrine. He also created the domino theory. It was the idea that if one country fell to communism, the surrounding countries would also fall to communism. This idea is the motivation behind the Korean and Vietnam Wars.
Russia was an autocracy until 1917, when lower-class discontent over World War I boiled over into a revolution. After Lenin died in 1924, Stalin took over and established the USSR as we know it, with secret police, an absolute ruler, and an active attempt to control the lives and thoughts of its people. At the outset of World War II, the USSR was an ally of Hitler's Germany, but soon after, Germany had turned and attacked the Soviet Union. The USSR changed to the Allies, and as they invaded France, Russia pushed back through lost territory in Eastern Europe. After the war, the Soviet Union helped set up government in the territories it had taken over. The governments it created were communist and heavily influenced by Russian politics. This buffer zone of satellite states, intended to guard against the capitalist world, was referred to as the Iron Curtain. It was interpreted by the West as an encroachment and led to such plans as the Marshall Plan. This led to a period of increased hostility with the West, as the Soviet Union and its allies receded into themselves behind this Iron Curtain. The US and USSR competed with each other fiercely, spending millions developing arms that granted momentary advantages for the war they believed was inevitable. They also competed in the space race, a competition for prestige and control of the skies. Russia accomplished early victories, like the first satellite and manned flight. In the end, the USSR's corruption, massive debts, and resistance created by the oppression of its peoples and that of other nations overwhelmed it. By the end of the 1980s, Soviet Russia and its satellite states had all collapsed. The big four leaders of the Soviet Union are Joseph Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev, Leonid Brezhnev, and Mikhail Gorbachev.
Capitalism and communism differ in almost every way possible. Capitalism takes by individualism and the betterment of one's own placement in society,
whilst communism is a single power deciding over important decisions, making the other equally wealthy, equally important people contribute to the community.
Capitalism makes you pay for your own health care. Whereas communism gives it to all its citizens. However, capitalism allows you the freedoms of privately owned land and businesses. Meanwhile, everything in communism belongs to the state. Lastly, communism is in charge of media activity, so nothing that may hurt the system could get out on a vast scale. Yet capitalism allows just about anyone to express their opinion and expose any government plots. The Bay of Pigs was a direct assassination attempt by the CIA against communist leaders in Cuba. After being led astray by the upset people of Cuba, the attempt failed miserably. The Cuban Missile Crisis, another exhibit of capitalist and communist tensions, was the biggest intimidation tactic via arm flexing with nukes instead of muscles. After JFK pushed nuclear weaponry closer to Russia's border, the Soviets retaliated by moving nuclear weapons into Cuba.